Good afternoon. And thanks, Alan, for the introduction and for the warm welcome. Now, I get to utter the words that most Hoyas never get to say. It's great to be in Syracuse. And it really is great because while I was born in Washington, D.C. and lived in Toronto until a few years ago, home for me is just about 90 miles west in Rochester. And our cities are connected by a lot more than just the New York State Thruway. After all, both are on the Forbes top 10 list of best places to raise a family. Both are blessed with world-class universities. And both share a history of innovation, from the invention of the traffic light by Crouse-Hinds in Syracuse to the founding of Xerox in Rochester. And in a few minutes, I'll tell you how the traffic lights and Xerox are linked in a way that you may not expect. But I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm really here to talk about change and transformation, a topic that I'm personally passionate about, which is why I was delighted to be invited to this meeting of CenterState CEO, a meeting dedicated to reinvention and continuous renewal. Now, there has been a lot of talk about the need for transformative change in the last few years. Today, I'll talk about how we have to reinvent ourselves and our thinking if we want to really master the game of change. And I'm going to focus on three questions today. One is, where do we find change and how should we frame it? Second is, where should we focus our energy and what should we do? And then finally, once we get this change thing going, how do we keep it going? How do we make sure that we make the change sustainable? But before we even get to that first question, let's face it, if we're really honest with ourselves, most of us aren't big fans of change, are we? I mean, after all, it's difficult, it's threatening, we often associate it with loss. And we're almost hardwired to resist it. And yet we can't avoid it. And often we pay lip service to it. We pretend to like it and go along with emotions. We even sometimes derail it, usually unconsciously with the best of intentions. Yet the speed of change is accelerating. There used to be a time in which we'd engage to take advantage of a specific opportunity. But now it's about just trying to survive. And it used to be followed up by this resting period. Well, the resting period is gone. Now it's this term I like to use called permanent whitewater. So it's important that we get this change thing right. We have to get better at it. Which leads me to my first question. Where do we find change and how should we frame it? Well, what we find today is that change is often driven by disruption. And disruptive forces do not discriminate. There was a recent Harvard Business article that really drove this point home. And what it said was in 1958, the average tenure of a company in the S&P 500 was 61 years. By 1980, it had dropped to 25 years. And today, just 18. So the largest companies used to be all set for 6 decades. And now, they can barely hang on for 2. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. It could be in the public sector or the private sector. No one is immune. Let me give you a few examples. So I'll begin with higher education. where disruptive forces are hard at work, including MOOCs, which are massive open online courses. Now, MIT taught their first MOOC on a course over the web, and they had 155,000 students around the globe sign up and take the class. And that's more than they have alumni in the history of the university. These courses are connecting students and educators in ways in which we never imagined in the early days of distant learning. Right now, no academic credit or tuition fees are involved. And many people say, well, if you can't really monetize it, then it's not really a threat. I wonder if that's true. Well, let's move over to the music industry. Remember just a few short years ago, it was this company called Napster that entered the picture and rewrote the rules that govern the music business for years, and that was free. Then along came a company called Apple. They came up with iTunes, and now we have companies like Pandora and Rhapsody and Spotify. These companies are making money, and the world of music is forever changed. Let's move over to healthcare. Rising costs, shrinking reimbursements, and ongoing reform have transformed the relationships between medical providers, payers, and patients. HIPAA, automated health records, the Affordable Care Act, all combining to redefine healthcare as we knew it. And then there's news and publishing. Talk about transformation. Digitization, customization, consolidation, just about every aspect of the way we create, consume, and deliver news has changed in an always-on, 24/7 world. Business models under pressure as advertisers funnel money into the new media. Even the classifieds found a new home on Craigslist. And a long list of newspapers and magazines closed the doors while others are rising up and recasting themselves for the future. And then there's, of course, the technology sector, where the major players are feeling the pinch and the pace of change. So we can start with Microsoft. When I grew up inside of Xerox in the 80s and 1990s, there was no stronger company in the industry than Microsoft. As a matter of fact, I remember reading an article that said that the only competitor that had a chance to derail Microsoft was the Justice Department, because they were that dominant. After all, they owned the PC platform and the whole Office suite, and that's where the world revolved. Well, next thing you know, the platform shifted from the PC to this thing called the internet. And even our definition of what a computer was changed, moving to things like tablets, smartphones, etc. PC sales have stalled, and last quarter, Microsoft saw its profits decline 22%. Let's move over to research in motion, RIM, or now called BlackBerry. By a show of hands, how many of you guys actually have BlackBerries that you carry? Can I see? All right. Wow. Okay. By a show of hands, how many Android users do we have? Oh, okay. All right. And then finally, how many iPhones? Look at that. Wow. Now, this is not quite fair, right? I mean, after all, having lived in Canada for several years, and Canadians are really proud of research in motion. They invented the category of smartphones. They've lost 1 million subscribers. Profit fell in half to $2.7 billion last year. They're currently pinning their hopes on the BlackBerry 10. Many skeptics think it's too little, too late. Time will tell. Let's move over to Oracle. Now, a couple of weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal weighed in on the computer hardware and enterprise software giant. And they're struggling as clients find less expensive database management options from the likes of companies like Salesforce.com. Now, the company execs blamed the new sales reps for the worst quarter in 2 years. Now, as a guy who grew up in the sales side of the house, that one kind of hit a little close to home for me. I mean, let's think about this. Your industry is shifting beneath your feet, and it's because some sales reps are green behind the ears? Clients are smart, and they're moving from expensive legacy systems to cheaper, more agile solutions in the cloud. Now, as we move closer to home, I do see some bright spots here in Syracuse. When Chancellor Nancy Cantor arrived at Syracuse University 9 years ago, she embarked on a change agenda that leaves the university and the region better than when she came. And she called it scholarship in action. But she didn't just talk the talk. She and other change agents, many of which are in the room here today, made it happen. The bold move of flagship programs in the School of Architecture from SU's own campus into the center of the city is a case in point. The Connective Corridor, a partnership between the public and private sector to physically connect the university with the broader community, is another. And perhaps my favorite example of innovation and disruption born in Syracuse, Say Yes to Education. All right, let me get this right. Live in Syracuse, okay? Attend 10th, 11th, and 12th grade at Syracuse City High School, and get into one of nearly 100 participating colleges and get a free college education. Wow. Talk about a game changer. And when Xerox learned about it, we granted one of our best salespeople, who's here today, Debbie Rosenbaum of Manalus, a paid social serve leave to help expand the program. You don't have to look far for examples of the power of change. Thankfully, neither do I. So let me share some lessons learned from the company I joined 28 years ago. Now, in those days, Xerox was known for one thing primarily: copiers. And we did it very well for a long time. But in the 90s, something happened. This thing called internet computing took hold. And two of our competitors joined forces, Canon and HP, and they developed a partnership in which Canon made these things called laser printers, and HP used their distribution network to sell them through value-added resellers. And we still had these big whopping copiers on the floor, but these network printers were on the network, and they were stealing all the volume, which is where all the money is made. I mean, it was unscrupulous, diabolical, insidious strategy. If I wasn't a Xerox, I might have called it brilliant, but I won't do that. So we orchestrated our first major transformation. We reinvented ourselves as a digital company. And today we've moved far beyond copying and printing, which we still do very well, and we're transforming again. The acquisition of Affiliated Computer Services a few years ago turned Xerox into the world's largest provider of document management and business process outsourcing. And with ACS, probably the biggest company you've never heard of, we went from a $15 billion company to a $23 billion company, which just goes to prove you can be disrupted, but thankfully you can also disrupt. You see, opportunities and threats are carpool partners. They arrive together. To appreciate them is often the question of reframing the threats into opportunities. But change always offers opportunities, even though it doesn't always feel that way when you're in the middle of the process. As part of our transformation, we had to make seismic shifts in every part of our business, including our direct sales operations. And at one point, I got so nervous, I began losing sleep over the enormity of the change that was required. And then one morning, I woke up. I jumped up, as a matter of fact, and realized how huge the opportunities were. And I got really excited. We could be more nimble. We could move faster. Our people could have much more exciting career and income possibilities. And we could begin to leapfrog the competition. Now, I could give you many examples of opportunities, but I'm just going to cite one that we pursued aggressively, managed print services. And it's all about helping clients reduce costs and focus on their core mission while we handle their printing and document management, something that became even more critical in the wake of the Great Recession, and once again put us head-to-head with HP, Canon, and other rivals. It turns out those little laser printers that Canon and HP teamed up to build and to sell ended up costing organizations a fortune when they found out what the true cost was, and we've been able to leverage that to disrupt back and manage that process and make our clients more efficient, more green, and more secure. And it was a race for market share that we had to move fast. So today we're #1 worldwide in this fast-growing managed print services market. We manage 2x more devices than any of our competitors, and has grown to be a substantial part of the company's portfolio. So staying positive and looking for opportunities is very important in this change business. Now let's look at the next question, number 2. Where should we focus our energies and what should we do? Along with opportunities, we also had challenges. We had secular decline in printing, and exciting new apps replaced a lot of our business. And while we had the world's best sales force in the 80s and 90s, we had been selling technology and machines for a long time. It's important really to focus on the right things. So we followed Michael Porter's advice, and we let strategy drive our structure, and then we let that help us determine our people needs. So for strategy, we unified our technology and our services direct sales groups and went from selling equipment to businesses of every size to more focused coverage, selling complex solutions to larger enterprise, to become services-led and technology-driven. From a structure standpoint, we went from 40 geographic regions to 10 with a single point of contact to better service our biggest clients, smaller accounts now handled by channel partners, more in tune with their needs. And then talent, we took a serious look at our talent base to get the right people in the right roles to carry out our new strategy successfully. And then at the same time, we had to re-educate the market outside to update their mental model of who we are and what we do. Let me show a couple of examples of our new TV spots designed to do just that.
Revolutionizing an industry can be a tough act to follow, but at Xerox, we've embraced a new role. Working behind the scenes to provide companies with services, like helping HR departments manage benefits and pensions for over 11 million employees, reducing document costs by up to 30%, and processing $421 billion in accounts payables each year, helping thousands of companies simplify how work gets done. How's that for an encore? With Xerox, you're ready for real business. When I say Xerox, I know what you're thinking. Transit fares, as in the 37 billion transit fares we help collect each year. No. Oh, right, you're thinking of the 1.6 million daily customer care interactions Xerox handles, or the 900 million health insurance claims we process. So it's no surprise to you that companies depend on today's Xerox for services that simplify how work gets done, which is pretty much what we've always stood for. With Xerox, you're ready for real business.
Okay. A very different Xerox from the one I joined 28 years ago, and probably different from the company you thought we were. Which brings me back to traffic lights, invented here in Syracuse in the formation of Xerox many years ago. Because at one time, we would have sold copiers to Krauss-Heinz. And today, we're using technology, billing, and business process expertise to manage the red light cameras that sit atop of traffic signals in cities nationwide. We're also behind school bus cameras to keep kids safe. And the next time you zip through the easy pass lane on the thruway, think of Xerox, because we're the ones making that magic happen. And with so many new offerings and new markets, we've had to become students of change And along the way, we've learned some things that may be useful as you pursue your own change agenda. So as far as execution, let the strategy drive the structure and drive the talent. But you have to also, while you do all this transformation, keep a keen eye on execution. The discipline to achieve specific goals every day, what author Jim Collins calls the 20-mile march. Make the case for change with vision that grabs people, communicate early and often, and once strategy and structure are worked out, talent then becomes a critical element. Hard, honest look at your resources and decide who can make the journey. Determine thinking and skill sets people are going to need, and make sure that you have a dashboard that reflects and reinforces these new skills. And then you coach and you teach those skills continuously. And that brings me to my third question. Let's talk about how we can keep change going, and how do we make change sustainable, and not just start the change initiative or pay lip service to it. And I'm going to quickly tee up 3 quotes from 3 very different perspectives. I guarantee you guys wouldn't have anticipated these 3 people being presented in the speech here today. Maybe 2 of them, yes. The third one, we'll see. First one, Peter Drucker. Talking about culture, which is the biggest make or break factor in the mix. He had a quote that says, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Net, you can have the best strategy in the world. If the culture doesn't embrace it, you will fail miserably. Second, Machiavelli. And he had a famous quote. And this, by the way, I will warn you, this is not exactly a pep talk for people who are trying to take on this whole change agenda thing. So I'll warn you. Don't let it stop you, though. There's nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. Because the innovator has for enemies all those who have done well under the old conditions, and only lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new. It sees people do not really or readily believe things until they've seen them working for a long period of time. And so it's this whole notion of resistance that you have to be prepared for when you take on these change initiatives. And then finally, maybe someone unorthodox, but another philosopher. All right, show of hands, how many people anticipated to hear Mike Tyson reference? Okay. So Mike Tyson, for those you don't know, was a very intimidating boxer in his heyday in the 90s, and he was about to fight a gentleman when he was invincible at the time. And the gentleman was being interviewed and said he was going to change his whole process. Instead of being a righty, he was going to go southpaw. He was going to do all these things differently. And the interviewer interviewed him, and Mike Tyson was right next to him. And then the interviewer gave the mic to Mike Tyson and said, "What's your response to what your opponent just said?" And Mike Tyson's response was, "Everyone has a plan until they get hit." And when they get hit, they start resorting back to the things that are comfortable to them. And guess what? You're going to get hit. And that's why McKinsey has a study that says, he studied from global CEOs and executives that said only 30% of these change initiatives are successful. And what happens is a lot of times when you're changing, you lose your focus on execution. And also this notion of when things get stressful, reverting back to your past. I call it muscle memory. Organizations go back to their muscle memory, the things that they were comfortable in doing. So you have to be on the lookout for that. And you have to make sure you determine your strategic imperatives and operational drivers that can get you to your goal, and then be clear and have your antenna up as to where these mindsets, these old mindsets, will undermine your efforts and prevent you from moving in new directions. And be certain everyone down through the layers is vigilant about keeping to the strategy and focusing on the operational drivers. So, okay, I think it's time for me to just say a few things in closing. And coming back to this theme of reinvention. Number one, where's change? Change is everywhere. and it's not going away. So you have to stay nimble or get nimble, or someone else is going to take advantage of the opportunities that await. Someone else will eat your lunch. Secondly, we have to reframe change and see it as an opportunity. And when you do that, you'll get caught up in the excitement, and that energy will drive your success. And then thirdly, if you want to make change sustainable, you have to think differently so you can do differently, and keep on top of that phenomenon all the time, or you'll never reach the place you set out to reach when you framed your strategy. So finally, if you only take one message from me here today, I hope it's that you know in your bones that none of us is exempt from change, and all of us have to keep pace with it. So don't hide from it. Lean into it. And whatever your role, or whatever your organization, public sector, private sector, small company, big company, executive, middle manager, what have you, I invite you to wrestle these old mindsets to the ground and become change masters who create the next great leaps for your organization. And knowing that we're all walking that path together gives me the evidence to be optimistic. I hope it's contagious. I wish CenterState CEO and all of you the best, and I look forward to turning our mutual excitement and optimism into real business results. Thank you for your time this afternoon.